Howdy everyone! So it seems that Kate decided to do a follow-up to her video because she wasn't happy that she was getting a lot of deserved shit for it. And of course she had to lie about the nature of what, the objections to her video, and she had to actually lie about what she was talking about in her new video. So let's just get started, shall we? So, she uploaded a video claiming that her whole "it's not terrorism yet" thing is correct because Rachel Maddow and a former, and that's a key word and I'll get back to that repeatedly, counterterrorism director said, quote, "it might not be terrorism," essentially. In the comments, she says directly this, quote, "Gee, I'm sorry, I guess your no-talent expertise trumps the, in all caps, fucking director of the counterterrorism unit that Rachel had as a guest. You know, the one who agrees with me. Rolls eyes, you're a fucking idiot, and I don't care if bombs are intimidating. The question is about motive and intent, not effect. Again, you're an idiot. Now, you have one, and I mean one chance to admit your mistake and be reasonable or rational, or be blocked. Which is it? Firstly, Kate, Michael Leiter was the former director of the National Counterterrorism Center. That is, he no longer works there, and he doesn't have access to the same information that the government has right now. But way to lie about who you were quoting, and falsely stating his position. It's pretty important when you talk about these sort of things to, actively state whether or not they're actually currently at that position or whether they used to be at that position. Because if he was currently at that position and saying that, well, he would have access to information that, the rest of us don't. But since he is a former the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, he no longer has access to all of that information. So, sorry, Kate, but even if he agrees with you, which it's not really clear that he doesn't work there anymore, and he doesn't have the same direct information that the government actually has at this point. And since you think that quoting someone on national television, which you say here repeatedly, someone on national television agrees with you. At least if I can get the exact quote. I don't feel like grabbing it, but basically, someone on national television agreeing with you doesn't make you right. For instance, if you had been paying attention to this event, which you probably haven't been paying much attention to it, you might remember that there have been multiple times where they've said that, where CNN and other media organizations have claimed that they had suspects or a suspect in custody. Remember that whole Saudi Arabian man thing that they claimed to have a custody in the hospital under guard? I remember that little bit of information, in quotes, that was spread around. I also remember them claiming to have had someone in custody on Wednesday morning, which also turned out to be false. There are many reports that turned out to be false, spread by the media. So just because someone on television says something that agrees with your position doesn't make you right. Because if that was the case, then every single right-wing nutjob on YouTube and on the internet in general who says, like Obama's a secret Muslim, or he wants to take away our guns, or any other of, a wide variety of ludicrous opinions, all of them would be correct too. But, there's one problem here, Kate, where you're saying this guy who is an expert agrees with you, therefore you're right and everyone else is just some cunting idiot. That problem would be the fact that, well, those of us who are, referring to this as a terrorist attack have, the president, his staff, the FBI, and the Boston Police Department. I'll leave at least a few links down below, but I'm pretty sure we all heard, everyone except for Kate, heard the president's speech. But, an administration official said on Tuesday that, based on all the available evidence at the time, it was a very reasonable assumption that this is an act of terror. Because notice, the president did not use the word at first. He waited a day when he had more information, which is when the government started actively referring to it as a terrorist attack. Obama says that they're investigating it as if it's an act of terrorism, because it, probably is. And that sort of assumption is not dangerous to make. They don't close off other avenues of investigation because of that. So that being said, Maddow is a news and political commentator. She's not an expert on terrorism. She's not a law enforcement expert. She's a very smart and educated person, but she isn't an expert in those fields. Her guest is, but neither of them are active members of the FBI, the Boston PD, or any other organization that would have inside access to what the government knows right now. Maybe you should think about the fact that maybe the FBI and President Obama are calling this a terrorist attack because they have a bit more information than they're letting out publicly. to people like you. Maybe they were keeping a few things close to their vest while they were doing further investigation or trying to track down the perpetrators, which kind of makes a bit of sense, seeing as how apparently one of the two suspects, both apparently whom are Chechen immigrants, apparently one of them is dead, as is one police officer, and the other one is currently on the run. If you did want to sit there and say maybe it's not terrorism, fine, feel free. But most people weren't giving you shit because of that directly. What they were giving you shit for was because you were trying to use this pedantic definition of terrorism, and when people were explaining to you there are multiple definitions of terrorism, even in use by our own government, you refused to listen. You refused to acknowledge it and just said, I'm right, you're all wrong, these definitions don't fit, even though they do fit, and there's a lot of debate about what terrorism actually is. You trotted out your fucking online dictionary to trying to find a term that has a mountain of political and legal and ethical baggage attached to it. And your flat-out wrong assertion, and people were also making fun of you because of your flat-out wrong assertion that if we don't know who did it and why, it's not an act of terrorism. Like I pointed out in my video, and Shredder brought up at least 2 instances as well, there's no fucking requirement that someone actually claims an attack, or that you necessarily know who did it and why for it to be a terrorist attack. So to prove this point, and because BionicDance wants to basically sit there and act like she's an expert and that experts agree with her on everything, I went to the RAND database of worldwide terrorism incidents, which I'll link to down below for those of you who are interested. It has a searchable database of terrorist attacks across the world. It's by no means complete because not all attacks can possibly be known or covered, but it's a pretty exhaustive list. And so I got bored, and this database goes from January 1st of 1968 to the end of 2010. And so I plugged in all the information, plugged in that date, and I sorted it by one fact and one fact alone. Were the attacks claimed by any group? Guess what? Out of all of their information there, 84% of attacks in the database were unclaimed. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we don't know who did it, because in some of those instances we caught the person, but 84% of those attacks were unclaimed. In raw numbers, that accounted for 33,540 attacks, compared to 6,589 attacks that were claimed. So, surprise, surprise, the vast ultra majority of attacks over the past half century or so that were recorded as terrorist attacks by RAND, which is one of the primary think tanks that deals with a lot of things, but deals with this issue specifically too, the vast ultra majority were unclaimed. That's why people were angry at you, because you don't know what you're talking about, and you're sitting there and opening your fucking stupid ass mouth on these issues. And you don't give a shit about this issue. I mean, you flat out said you don't feel any empathy for the victims. You basically wanted to get out there and trot out your dictionary and be like, I'm the most skeptic person of them all. Me. And you don't know what you're talking about. This isn't an issue you care about. You don't give a fuck about politics. You don't know anything about politics. You definitely don't know anything about terrorism. You've never researched the subject once in your fucking life. Because, again, you don't even understand that the United States government has multiple different definitions of terrorism, at least twice in different parts of the fucking legal code, and then in other parts that are just used by various departments. Like, I mentioned it last time that I wasn't going to even bother quoting it, but here we'll quote the DoD. The term terrorism is defined as the calculated use of violence or threat of violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. There you go. There you go. The goal generally, as in not always, is political, religious, or ideological. But I guess, Kate knows more than the Department of Defense, and she wants to play expert penis waving here, I guess. I guess Kate here is asserting that she knows more than the Department of Defense, which is the organization, for better or worse, that's been spent more blood and treasure than anyone else fighting terrorism and terrorists across the fucking planet, I guess, for the better part of a decade. And I guess Kate knows more than the FBI, knows more than the Boston Police Department, knows more than the president and his national security staff. I guess she's just an expert, and all those people are just a bunch of people who are just running on automatic and not thinking. sorry, Kate, I think I'll go with, the experts who are in government and what they're saying versus what you're saying. And, but instead you wanted to make your cheap cash grab twice, with your fucking Zazzle store and your fucking ads on your video. Instead of, waiting for any actual facts or any more information to come out. That's what you wanted to do. Like right now, again, they're still on the manhunt for the second suspect who's still alive. By the time most of you watch this video, he may have been caught or killed by now, and we'll probably know a lot more by the time most of you finish watching this video. But, I would also have thought that someone who claims to be as liberal as you are, and someone who claims to watch Rachel Maddow as much as you are, would be as much as you do, would be a bit aware of the definition fight over terrorism and how that occurs in the United States. Especially when it comes to several other instances, like, I don't know, attacks on abortion clinics, or Dr. Tiller being killed, or say, I don't know, extreme right-wing, like, militia sort of groups, and whether or not things they do, or are planning to do, or have done, are considered terrorism or not. You might have been aware of those sorts of things if you paid as much attention as you're claiming here. But of course, you're apparently not aware of these definition fights, just like you're not aware of most things in your life, just because you're a fucking child. And I also have to say, again, she made another claim in the comments that, quote, this is another thing people were laughing at her for, quote, "And the bomb types and how they are detonated tell us diddly about the intentions of the bomber, except that they intended to kill, injure people. That's all the bombs tell us, you fucking ignorant, all in caps, shit for brains fool. Now I've had enough of you, we're done unless you have something new to say." And here's Kate, again, talking out of her depth, because if she had bothered to do 5, maybe 10 minutes of research on this, she would know that one of the most useful tools for identifying perpetrators and, who they are and why they carried out an attack of this sort is actually the bombs themselves and how they're detonated. Because various bomb makers tend to have various signatures, and various groups tend to favor certain types of explosive devices over other types of explosive devices. So what type of bomb was used can tell you quite a bit about who carried out an attack and why. But again, Kate doesn't bother to do any research about this sort of thing. She just wants to sit there and try and act superior and pretend like she's some sort of ultra-skeptic, even though she never listens to what anyone says. She never listens to what anyone says. She won't admit when she's wrong. She doesn't do any research. And she's, basically just thinks she's always right and correct on anything because she's a stupid cunt. And it's like the only person she referenced in this whole thing that had any expertise in anything was the former counterterrorism director, who obviously is not the current one and therefore doesn't have access to anything. But, again, I guess she's going to keep going about how she knows about how, BionicDance is apparently more informed than the FBI and the president and the Boston Police Department, which is, I guess, what she is which is literally what she has to be asserting here, because she's calling into question their definition, is them calling this a terrorist attack. She's fighting against that, so clearly she is stating that she knows more about what's going on and has more information than they do. I am also sure that, the FBI and the president and the Boston Police Department and also the state of Massachusetts would love to hear, Kate, your theory about why they shouldn't call this an act of terror and a terrorist attack, why they shouldn't do that, and why they shouldn't be activating the, FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and, why that shouldn't be called in, and why the federal government should just sit this one out and let Boston handle it. I'm pretty sure they'd like to know about why you don't think it's appropriate for the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force to be called in here. Because, again, that is also what she is saying with her argument here. Of course, she's too stupid to realize that, because she doesn't know anything about this, and she doesn't know that classifying this as an act of terror also lets the federal government come in with a lot of its resources, because, again, maybe BionicDance isn't aware of this, but the FBI tends to have a lot more money and a lot more expertise and a lot more manpower than the Boston Police Department does. No slight on the Boston Police Department, it's just that the federal government has options to, create more money in debt than a local police department does. Also, since I mentioned Chechnya in this video, and I'm pretty sure Kate will watch it, even though she usually says she doesn't, but then talks about it vaguely, the things I say or Skep says in his videos later. Since you don't know what Chechnya is, Kate, I mentioned that before because apparently the two suspects are from Chechnya. Chechnya is a region in Russia. It's in the North Caucasus Mountains. Since you don't know anything about it, I encourage you to go look up the First and Second Chechen Wars, or various terrorist attacks like the Moscow Theater incident, all the apartment bombings that used to occur in Russia, and many, many other things. Well, you're not going to, but basically Chechnya is a region that's had a bit of trouble with its own separatist / extremist / Islamic terrorist organizations roaming around, primarily because radical Islam has gotten a hold there, and also because, well, the Russian, and then I guess at one point the Soviet government, didn't exactly treat the Chechens all that well. So there's a lot of bad blood there. So that's a little bit of small little background on the area, so you can go investigate it for yourself. And lastly, YouTube, those of you watching this, the next time BionicDance tries to talk about this or any sort of complex political subject and, veers out of her, saying 4 videos about why all theists are stupid monsters or whatever, the next time she tries that, just remember this. I, someone who at the time was, I believe, 24 or 25, had to explain to someone in their mid to late 30s, that person being BionicDance, basically a very brief history of the Korean War because she didn't know which Korea the United States was essentially enemies with and why. This was during the sinking of the Cheonan and the shelling of the island whose name I forget. That occurred in a blog TV. If you want some verification on that, there are probably some people you could ask who were there. But basically, BionicDance doesn't know anything. She doesn't even know basic world history that, even fucking first graders know. I'm pretty sure if you asked a first grader which Korea does the United States have problems with, or which Korea is the bad Korea, I'm pretty sure even most of them would be aware that it's North Korea. So I'm going to leave some links down below, and I hope you all have a nice day. Except for BionicDance. You're a bitch.